All right, there we go. Okay, so we're going to look at taking the UML, the Uniform Modeling Language, and then converting that to an actual class. So I'm going to start with my IDE here, which was on my other computer and not here. So give it a second while it boots up. All right, there it is. This is right out of the book. I wanted to pick just kind of any UML and then just figure out, all right, what do we then do with this? So let us start, and I'm going to move this over to my other window, and let's get a clear palette here. Okay. Now, when we take this UML and convert it, we know right away that the UML gives us a couple of sections. The top section are the private members and the bottom section, the public. The private ones will have a negative sign in front of the variable names, whereas the public ones will have a plus sign showing that they're public in front of those method names. What we can do here to start is simply we'll start with the name customer there. That is our class name, so we'll call it class customer. Pretty clever, I know. Right away, let's create our private and our public section delimiters. Some people don't tab over for private and public, and some do. It's your choice, just stay consistent. I'll probably tab over just because that's the way I have usually liked it. Now, some though will not do another set of tabs under public and private, like me, just because that's a little too excessive. So what we can do to start now is let's just list those 3 private member variables, name, address, phone, that the UML has. And this UML, the way that the Uniform Modeling Language is crafted is that we get the name of the member element, I'll call it. It could be a variable or a method. So here it's a variable. And then it gives us the data type, of course, right after that. So we've got string name, string address, and string phone. There we go. Pretty straightforward there. The public entries, though, for our methods are a little more complex. And we'll just take those very, very slowly to start. Let's see, somebody is not muted, so I'm going to mute you. Got a little chatter there. There we go. So let's take a look at the public methods then. We've got our mutators and we've got our accessors. All right, so there's just a little kind of a comment that's going to just segregate these 2 public methods. So accessors will just start. Accessors are essentially, it's almost like a read-only operation. All we want is their name. All we want is their address. All we want is the phone. In other words, all we want is the data. We're not going to touch it at all. All we want is the data itself. So what these do, the way that this UML here is crafted is that since this is a method, then it's not giving us the data type of a variable. It's giving us the return type of this method. So that's the difference between a string here that is right next to a method name as opposed to a string up here, which will be right next to a variable name or a member element name. So remember that delineates the return type of the function or the method. So let's do this now. We'll do a string get name, string get address, and string get phone. Oops, not that. There we go. Very straightforward here. I don't think anyone probably have any trouble with that. However, the mutators are just a little bit different, because if you'll notice, now suddenly we've got a lot more syntax in that UML to try and parse and to figure out, well, where do these little bits and pieces go? So let's take these one at a time. First of all, this void is going to be very clear what that is. This is a void function. It's not going to return anything. So knowing it's a void, let's just get those in now. There we go. So that's pretty easy to delineate there. Void, 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 3 void functions, and there they are. And then just a reminder here, with classes, these are officially methods. So I'll try and use the word method as much as I can, but you're getting the idea here that these methods are mini functions. They're encapsulated, contained member functions for this class. It's very common for the word function also to be used here. So I'll kind of go in and out. I'll probably try and stick with just method to show that, well, this is a class method as opposed to a program's function. Now, when we look at this UML, though, we see that this one has got a parameter. That's what's inside those parentheses. And in this case, it's going to be a string variable named n. And that makes sense, because if we're going to use the setName mutator method to provide a name for an object, then yes, absolutely, we've got to include that, that parameter. So in this case, we can just do this, string n. And in the next one down, string a. And then finally, in the very last one, we'll do a string p. And there we go. So our class is created, and we really didn't have to think horribly much about this class. We just took that UML and we just sort of rearranged it and juggled it, and then put the puzzle pieces back together, and we have a class out of it now. We have an actual class. So I'm going to now move this over. And given that we've got a class, remember my grand piece of advice for my students, just get one thing running at a time. So here we have a class. Let's just run it and make sure that we've got everything running. And oh, we got an error. It's saying, oh, you forgot a semicolon there. So let's run it again, make sure it's clean, and it is. Okay, so this is our class for the customer. Now, given this, we will probably want to come up with some kind of a demonstration. So when I say that for an assignment, you'll have to create a class, which will mean when we get into, when we're splitting files now, our class is going to have to have a couple of different files. But for right now, we're just going to code the whole thing in one. Now let's see, I am still sharing, hopefully. For module 4, we don't have to split up into multiple files yet, and that's why I just want us to stay on one page and do the fully developed, no inline functions, but the fully developed ones there. And then when we get here, I'm going to kind of scroll ahead, but when we get into chapter 5, we're going to be looking specifically at separating our files out. All right, so we're doing real well here. The only thing remaining is that we have got 6 methods that still need to be defined. We've got get name, get address, get phone, and then we've got set, set, and set. So let's look at those real quick about how we can go getting those. Now, I want to go over the concept of inline functions versus fully developed and fully written functions. If we look at the get name method, if we were to fully develop this into a method like this get name method will have exactly one instruction, return name. Similarly, the others would have return address and return phone, really just one instruction. So, we could do this, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 extra lines of code to flesh that out. And that's 5 lines, including that one little blank space. But C++ does give us sort of this little benefit of, if we want to do a little shortcut, we can do an inline function. And how you do that is you take just the statement, including the semicolon, return name, and we're going to cut that. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut everything else while we're at it. So we're kind of back to a nice well formatted code. What we can do here then is we just literally paste it right there. And then we put braces around it, since it is asking for some definition. In this case, it's just simply going to return the name, and that's it. So here we did that. Let's run it, and it's nice and clean. So we do have some successful code here for getting these methods developed. I'm going to go ahead and do inline functions now for the others. And there we go. And it could be that simple. Some programmers prefer to do this, where you can sort of line up those function definitions. I think that's just fine if you want to do that. I'm probably a more compact coder, and I would want to just leave it like that. Here's another interesting note. Some IDEs will not complain, or I should say some compilers will not complain if you put an extra semicolon after that method definition. So for example, I'm on Amazon's Cloud9, and that does not care. But I think some other compilers do care. And if that is the case, then you would just take out those semicolons. In this case, a code block is defined by braces. So in this case, Cloud9's compiler just doesn't care about that. So that's what we mean by an inline method or an inline function. And then just to review, an inline function is going to replace a mini method that is crafted just like that. Okay, so those are good there. Now our mutator sessions our mutator methods are a little different. They're going to receive a parameter. Now we can do, the book says, or the book kind of implies, and I put this in the notes for this module, the book kind of implies that you only want to do these inline functions for functions that are simply going to be returning something or that have a very simple statement. And the book does not have this nomenclature here, where inside the class name, we're actually going to go ahead and put in a temporary variable. Those are optional. Matter of fact, we could remove those and run it, and we'll still get a nice clean code. And that's because these are sort of function prototypes. And in function prototypes, a temporary variable name is optional. And it's the same thing here with our class methods. A temporary variable name is optional. So I'm going to do two ways here first. The first way is going to be to do it with a full-blown, fully developed method declaration. And then let's convert this to an inline function. So let's do this, void set name. And here, since we are doing the full-blown function definition, we do have to include that temporary variable name. Let's also not forget the class name and then the scope operator. And in this case, inside our method, it's just going to be nice and simple. Whatever n is, we're going to assign it to name. Right there. So remember, n is the inbound. We're going to take that and assign it to the private member variable name. So that's where we get this name. That's from the class private elements. And then that's where we get this n is our parameter name, and that's what's going to get sent to us. All right, so we could then repeat this for the others. But if we wanted to take this, matter of fact, let me just take this code now, and I'm going to comment it out. It's still there so we can look at it. But if we wanted to do an inline function for this method, we can. It's just one line of code, name equals n. So we do have to, so we are eligible really to make it an inline function. So let's just do that real quick. Name equals n. Right there. Now our problem with this method right here, this method definition that we're trying to do, is the compiler has no idea what n is right here. And that's because we took out the temporary variable name right there. So if we do an inline function for that, make sure to put that temporary variable back in. All right, so let's run it. Let's make sure that we're nice and clean, and we are. So we're on to something here and it's working. Same thing for address and then same thing for phone. So we could do fully developed code or we could do inline. So in this case, I think for the benefit of just something new and something different, let's do inline methods for all of those. Let me first spell phone correctly, you all. Gosh, my fingers are just typing all the wrong characters today. Here we go. Address equals a semicolon brace. There we go. And there you have it. There's our fully developed class, including the implementation. We've got both the declaration and the implementation together here with this code. Of course, the implementation being all of the methods fully coded and developed and not just a bunch of prototypes listed in the class listing. So this is how we do all that. Let's get, I'm gonna run it again. Oh, we got something here. What is it?
Professor, forget an equal between phone and D.
Yep, there it is. All right, there it is. So now let's figure out what to do with this. Well, let's just create a simple object real quick, a super simple object. There we go. There's our customer, call him cust1. And then we can do, let's do some mutators real quick and just get those assignments done. All right, there's sort of a short address for that. All right, let's run this. And if we've got no errors, then we know that our object was first of all created. And then we had the 3 private data elements that are of that class. We had those assigned to some values. So now our object is cust1 and it's got those 3 member elements. So just to validate that, you know, right now our code's running clean, but just to validate that those values actually made it into the object, let's go ahead and just do some quick counts here. And of course, we'll use all of our accessors here. There we go. We will do quick function calls to the three accessors. And there they are. There's the three data elements output to the console. And that is it for converting one over to another. So now, Jeff, I see your question here. Do we need a constructor as well? No, you don't. Our next module, we get into constructors, and we'll actually also get into overloading our constructors. So when we create an object, we can provide a list of components, of elements that will initialize that object to these variables. Right now, we can't do that yet because we haven't learned about constructors, and we'll learn about destructors in module 7 or so. But what a constructor is going to do for us, it's going to let us put in some data elements right here between these parentheses. So we don't have to do direct assignments. As soon as we create the object, it's going to then populate the private member variables with those data. But that is for our next module. All right, so that's it on converting this UML over to a class and getting it to work with some data and to get a demonstration in. So what I will do now, I'm going to stop the recording now, and I'll get this posted up, and then let me open it up for any questions, any tutoring thing that you want to talk about.